Hey guys, welcome back to the third part of this three-part tutorial series on an intro to compositing in After Effects. So today we're going to be doing a little bit more of a complex composite, and we'll be focusing on these car interior shots. As you can see, we filmed in front of a blue screen because it's a lot safer to, film driving this way instead of try to film while we're actually driving. So let's take a look at the sequence. Comes around the corner, they're driving. And, we'll have the interior window shots like that is our goal. The shot we'll be focusing on today is this one, right? Original shot would have looked like this. And we want to key out these, the blue, so that we can add in the background. Hopefully it'll look something like this. Let's get over into After Effects and take a look at the folder first. Okay, so if we go into our downloaded folder of our source material, we'll see we have, the 2 lessons and the third one. We want the complex composite. We open that up. And as you can see, there's a lot going on here. We have 6 different shots, you can go and play with. I added 3 extras without examples that, if you would really like to, you could go in and start playing with it, figuring out different ways of going about using it. We've got the 3 versions that have examples up here. And then most importantly, we have the most important element, which is the background of the driving. Now, of course, you can see there's 2 versions. We won't focus on the rotoscope version of the car interior shot 1 for now. Okay, we're going to focus on this first one that says chroma keyed, okay? And this is sort of what the shot's going to look like in the end. This is the goal for the first part of this video. Alright, let's head on into After Effects and let's get started. Okay, now that After Effects is open, let's create a new project. And now from here, I know a lot of the time we were saving at the end in the other 2 videos, but I think for something like this, it'll be a little bit more complicated. Let's save right at the beginning, okay? Let's find where we want this to go. We want this to go right next to our source material. And let's call it, 2022 underscore 3.3 complex composite. And let's save. Cool. Now from here, let's import our footage. We reopen our folder, and we want to bring in car interior 1, which we can drag and drop. And, let's bring in our background shots too, all 3 of them. Boom, all imported. Now this is all we'll need for now. Let's create a new composition, Remember, we click, we drag down, and here's our composition. If we play back the footage, it's not too bad, it's not too long, which will be super good to work with. Let's jump right into learning how to chroma key. So, today we'll be heavily using this effects and presets window, okay? And it should be up here in under the default interface layout. We go to the effects and presets, we search key, and the one we're going to be using under keying is key light. So let's take it. Let's drag it onto our clip, boom, and we'll see in the effects controls window, it shows up here. Let's take this little eyedropper, to find the screen color. We're going to pick it on this nice blue here, and when we do that, as you can see, it starts removing all that blue and everything that's that color. But the issue is we've started losing a lot of the data, Come down here, and you can check this little toggle transparency grid, and when you click that, it'll show you the transparency boxes, which I find very helpful with something like this. So otherwise, like this, just looks like a nighttime scene. So we're gonna click that so we can see what's happening. Now, this doesn't look too great at all. So what we want to do is play with some of these settings, Now this one doesn't do much. Play with the screen gain, which sees how much we want to remove, and whoa, way too much. So I think this somewhere around just over 100 may be good. Biggest area we want to play with is the screen matte, okay? And we want to start playing with these to figure out how we can refine this matte. Whoa, this works better when we roll back the white. Now, as you can see, play with the settings. Something like this will probably work best for this shot. To understand what each thing is doing, let's go up to here, click Final Result, Screen Matte. Boom, now it shows us black and white of what's happening. Now, chroma keying, we learned about mattes in the first tutorial, and how the use of mattes can help us stack layers on top of each other. And what we want to do when we basically chroma key something, or we green screen something, we key it out, is to create a matte of whatever element we want in front of a background that we'll add in later. Okay? So in this case, everything that's white will stay, and everything that's black will disappear as the matte. It'll be gone, which will be perfect because then we'll be able to see the background through it. And playing with these settings, especially the clip black and the clip white, we'll start to do some funky stuff like that, and cleaning up the matte. 5 was good, yep. And playing with the white, something like that, yeah, I think that's good enough. The screen softness, just softens the edges. Now, too sharp doesn't look so good. I liked around 3. I think these are the settings that will work. Let's go back up here to Final Result, and we got something like this, which doesn't look too bad. I'm pretty happy with this one. It's key. It's a lot nicer. Actually, let's keep playing with it. 1 sec, because of that. Alright, yeah, roll it back to maybe 48, and I think that's good enough. Now from here, let's go into project, and we'll bring in the background now. Let's go up to our 3 different elements, and let's double click to view the first one, press the space bar to play, and I think we'll just go with this one. Looks pretty good. Let's close our footage monitor, bring it, and drag it into our timeline. Now, if we drop it below the car interior shot, right, we can see that the matte has worked, and we can see the background through the window. Let's press play, and as we can see, it looks a little janky, you know. It's not great, it's not horrible, but we can definitely make this a lot better. So let's first of all take this bottom clip. We're driving a little bit slow. Okay, so let's take it, let's right click, let's go to time. What we're gonna do is we're gonna time stretch it, okay? In Premiere Pro, when you change the time of something, right, the speed, it'll do it as a percentage. In this case, we're doing it by some sort of factoring. So what we do, if we type a smaller number, for example, I think 30 will be the way to go, it'll shorten it and compress the clip. So it'll be a lot faster. If we take a look out the window now, that is going a lot faster. Let's take it and let's just drag it so it starts a little bit later so that the speed is more consistent, and I think that looks pretty good. Now, the only problem is the shot is handheld, right? But our background is not moving with it. Our background, if we solo it by clicking this little button here, is very smooth, okay? And our matte is not. It's moving all over the place. So what we want to do is we're going to create some track data so that we can attach it to the background, and so the background will then follow our foreground. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to do that by introducing something called a null object. And a null object, we'll bring it to the bottom, is basically a null object looks like this. What a null object does is it's sort of an element or a layer in your timeline that is not visible, it's not seen, but all it does is it carries information, okay? For example, it carries transform information, scale, position, rotation. You can even do opacity, anchor point, but we're going to focus on position, scale, rotation, specifically just position and rotation today. Now, of course, if we want to, attach the background to the clip, we could go and use the keyframes like we did. Keyframe the position, and every frame we move it so it looks like it matches, but that's going to take forever, so we're not going to do that. Let's just reset that. And so what we're going to do instead is we're going to have the software track it for us. How are we going to do that? Let's select the top clip, because this is the one that has the data. We'll open the tracker tab, and we're going to click track motion. Boom. So it'll open up this other window that we can work in. We're going to select the position and the rotation. We're going to take one point, and there's this point over here, right in the window frame. We're going to scale it up so that there's more data for it to track. Basically how it works is it will try to keep this point on this point of the shot the entire time, okay? And it uses these boxes around as reference to how much it's moving, okay? So we're gonna move back to the other one, okay? And how I'm doing that is we can use the hand tool by going up here and clicking H, right? And moving, okay? Let's go back to V. The way I like to do it though is clicking the space bar, and when I click and hold, it changes to the hand tool. Boop, boop. That's my favorite way to navigate when we're zoomed in. Let's take this other point and we'll put it over here on this white bright dot here. We'll scale it up, place it there, and I think that'll work. Let's go down here, fit up and reset our composition so we can see the full thing. And what we're going to do from here, we have our 2 track points. It looks good, I think. Let's scale this one a little bit. We're going to click this arrow and analyze forward. Now as you can see, the software is going to track it, and it got to the end. If I scroll through, you can see that it did a pretty good job at keeping those points on those 2 locations of the scene, which is perfect. So I think we're not going to touch that. We're going to go edit target so that we know where it's going, and we want it to go to the null object so that this information and all the motion data will be now with the null object. So we click OK, we click apply. Okay, we want both X and Y dimensions, and if we close that and we click the null object, we can see that it now has the track data. Now, how do we put this track data onto our background? We're going to do it with a method that's called parenting. Parenting is basically all the transformations that happen to one layer. An object that is connected to that will then have the same transformations, right? So, for clarity, let's turn off the top layer, okay? And as we can see, our shot is very stable, yeah? If we take our background and we want it to be parented and linked to the null object, so we can take this little pick whip, pull it onto the null object, and let go. Now, if we press play, we can see there's some movement now, right? And it's following the movement of the scene. If we undo that, this is it before, super stable. We bring it on, we pick whip again, And there's slight movement up and down now, which is perfect. Now it's attached to our top layer. So what we're going to do, we're going to take the background and let's just scale it down a touch. It's a little big. Let's move it. Let's grab the W tool. Let's rotate it because, right, the original clip was on a bit of an angle. So we can straighten that out a bit. And I think that looks good. Go back to the V, the selection tool, and move it about there. I think that looks good. Press play. So it looks like this. It looks even better. But we can definitely make it look even better. Now, if you remember, we go back to Premiere Pro. It was snowing when we were driving. So let's add the snow back in. How are we going to do that? Well, let's go back into our folder and let's take our assets. Remember from the last tutorial, we had a bunch of snow assets. So let's bring them all in. I'll select them and drag and drop them to import them into After Effects. I think we're going to focus on using only the far one. Yeah, exactly. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the far blizzard snowfall, drag and drop it in between the car interior shot and the background like that. Hope you remembered that these were snow elements on a black background. I'm just going to drag it so we can see the snow start sooner. It's on the black background. Now how do we remove that again? Well, let's go to our blend modes and we want to change the blend mode from normal to screen. Boom, now we can see our background again. Now from here, we know that if we solo the snow, it'll be back on the black. If we press play, yeah, the snow's going the wrong direction. So how can we flip that? Remember, we go to click S to open scale. Let's turn off the lock parameters tool. We go -100 and lock that again. Cool. So I do want to scale the snow down a bit. So let's scale it down so it's like that. And now as we can see the snow, it's very faintly there. You can barely see it. So we're going to do some color adjustments using, again, effects from the effects and presets window to sort of marry everything together a little bit better. Because it doesn't look too bad. We've got all the layers we need. We've got all the elements we need. And this is basically the simplest form the shot could be. But we want to make it as good as we can. Let's try to make it a little bit more believable. And usually color correction and effects are the way to go. So let's go up to our effects and presets window and let's just quickly try to bring the snow a little bit more visibility because it's a little bit faint. So we're going to find the curves tool. Okay, it's under color correction. We drag it and we want to drop it on the snowfall layer. Now let's take the brightness of this, and basically the curves tool allows us to change sort of the different parameters, whether it's the brightness, the red, the green, the blue, or the alpha channel. But let's not worry about the alpha channel for this at all. So we're going to focus on just the full RGB. And what we want to do is bring up the brightness like this, and as you can see, the snow is already becoming more visible. Problem is though, snow is extremely sharp now, and we can see some of these edges. Okay, so what we want to do is go blur, and let's add a camera lens blur, and I think setting at 4 of a radius works the best. And as we can see, it's already a little bit more blended. Yeah, it looks already a little more blended into the scene. Now while we have blur open, right, we search blur in the effects and presets window, I want to take a directional blur and add that to our background layer. So let's solo the background layer for now by clicking here, and if we turn up the blur length, we can see that now the shot blurs in a specific direction. If I turn this wheel, the direction of the blur will be dependent on where this is facing. And now we want this blur to go sideways. There, okay? So this is about 84 degrees. We're going to turn the blur length to 50, and I think that looks pretty good. If we toggle this on and off, we can see the difference. It will add a little bit more, I think, immersion to the scene. So let's unsolo it, let's go back to the beginning, let it render, and as we can see, once it's finished, it looks a lot more believable. There's a lot more speed, the snow looks pretty good, and I'm pretty happy with that. Now, what can we do to make this even better? So what we know is we lost a lot of color in our interior original shot, right? It's very dark, very black. So let's do some color correction to make that feel a little bit more defined. So again, like we did in the last tutorial, we're going to use the Lumetri color. Just drag and drop it onto the car interior. Let's open basic correction, and I think the first thing we want to bring up the warmth a little bit. So about 13, I think that looks good. It starts to see his skin tones start to match a little bit more of that background. Let's go to saturation. If we saturate it a tad, it'll bring the colors in a little bit more. So something subtle like 105. If we toggle this on and off, you can see the slight difference this is making and bringing back some more life into that original shot. If we play it again, we have our final shot. And I think that looks pretty good. From here, I did forget to add earlier, we can have the snow also follow the null object, which is the joy of the null object. We can have multiple layers follow the data of the null. And now, we used the pick whip last time, right, to drag and drop and take it, to drag it, pull it over the null, and now it's following the data. But what we can also do is we click here, we open the word that says none and select null one. And now if we take a look at the snow, we can see that now the snow outline is following the null. You can't really tell because the snow is moving so fast, but it definitely helps add a little bit more realism, right? When everything is tied together and everything is a little bit less floaty in a way when you have a handheld shot. So, I hope you learned something from this tutorial. I hope that was simple enough to follow along. Key concepts we went over today were chroma keying and how chroma keying helps us create mattes that we can use to then add whatever we want, other elements behind, other layers. Like in this case, we added the snow and the background. We also talked about motion tracking and how motion tracking is very helpful in trying to pair elements to one another, especially during a handheld shot like this one. What's important with creating motion track data is that we need it to go somewhere, and that's what null objects in parenting are for. We use the null objects to take certain layers and have them follow what the null is doing after the null has the track data. Okay, and it really ties everything better to the scene. I usually like to use the term, and a lot of people use the term, that it looks like it floats, right? We don't want it to float. We want it to feel grounded into the scene, right? We also used assets again. We took the snow asset and brought that back in. We also talked just a little bit about the color correction and how changing the colors can really help tie everything together even better. I hope that gave you a bit of an introduction to this 3-part tutorial series on an intro to compositing in After Effects. I hope you learned something about the basics of compositing. I hope you're able to take things you learned and try something with it. Thank you. Have a good one. Now, if you would like to learn another method of how we can complete this same car interior shot, check out the bonus tutorial that will be focusing on the concept of rotoscoping.